Chodesh Tov, happy new month of Nisan to everyone. So I invite you to thank yourself for showing up to today's practice, for making this time. Thank each other for creating this space for us to sit and heal and breathe and learn and just be. It's a deep privilege and gift for me to sit with you, whether I'm leading or sitting with you as one of the many Zoom boxes. It's just always an incredible gift and privilege. So thank you. So we're going to begin sitting. I really want to invite you to find your seat, and you can have your eyes open or closed or anywhere in between. Just begin by taking a moment to move around a little bit in your body, just naturally and organically, perhaps with some shoulder rolls or neck rolls, a gentle seated twist in your seat. Just any gentle movement which will allow you to help create a little bit more space for your breath before we find greater stillness. And when you feel yourself called to slow down the motion, sense your connection to the earth and fully embody that plugging in to your seat. I invite you to take a couple of deep cleansing breaths as a way of claiming your body, your space in this moment. And then allow your breath to find a natural and steady rhythm. You may even endeavor to create a kind of subtle and supple breath pattern in which you even out the breath, allowing your inhalation to be approximately the same length as your exhalation. Just feel yourself breathing. And now I invite you to place a hand on your heart, or maybe fingers on your wrist or your neck, just to take note of your beating heart. Allow that pulse to be proof of your existence, of your being here. And of the freedom that comes with choosing to be here while we're here, tuned into this present moment. And it's not always pleasant to be in the present. So however you're showing up to this moment, allow, allow, allow. And when you're ready to open your eyes, notice if you sense even a slight shift in your nervous system, in your breath, in your own inner sense of well-being. So I'm going to offer a little bit of instruction, and then we're going to practice again in a slightly different way. As we know, Rosh Chodesh Nisan is here. And so if you weren't already aware that Pesach is around the corner, there's no escaping it now. The count up is on, and the preparation for all of us, body and soul, house and home, kitchen and table, are upon us. And for many of us, and I'm speaking to myself here, as much as I absolutely love the holiday of Pesach, I also find the preparation incredibly daunting. So maybe like me, this year brings some kind of extra challenge. In my case, my mom and dad are usually here to help with the challenge of changing out dishes and cleaning appliances and cooking and kids. And this year, my mom's going to be having back surgery, healing from back surgery, and my dad will be attending to her. So it's on me. And perhaps you are preparing with an extra measure of difficulty, whether it's the stress of rising food prices, as if kosher for Passover foods are not already ridiculously expensive, or the recent loss of a loved one, or being in a new community where you don't yet have family or family, or maybe you're simply just moving through a difficult season of life, being human. Or maybe none of these challenges at all, but you just find Pesach prep to be overwhelming. So know that you are not alone. Meditation offers me many tools to help me navigate my life, and in this case, Pesach prep. So that's what I would like to share a bit about today. So one of those many tools is emotional self-regulation. So when we activate and connect to the parts of the brain that are related to self-regulation, we still feel any number of unpleasant feelings, but we may experience a little bit less stress, reactivity, anxiety. In other words, meditation offers us a way to practice fully sensing and experiencing whatever arises, but to respond in compassionate and adaptive ways. And how does meditation do this? We know all the things: relaxation, breathing, mental imagery, mind-body awareness, presencing ourselves. And of course, in Jewish mindfulness meditation, we do this, we contextualize it within Jewish themes and stories and wisdom and vocabulary so that the practice feels indigenous to our souls. So dysregulation occurs when our brains respond to sensory input, things coming in through our five senses, in a way that triggers an alarm or fear state. And remember that this alarm fear state is set to protect us, actually, from threats to our survival. And when we perceive an actual or perceived threat, we're actually operating at the lower parts of our brain, and we become more reflexive and more emotional. And our ability to listen and learn and comprehend and cope can significantly be impacted. So with meditation, we tune into precisely that part of our brain that controls heart rate and other survival-related functions. That's the place in the brain where anxiety is stored. And then we practice self-soothing. And so to re-regulate, we start from the bottom of our brains and slowly rise to the top. And when we regulate, then we have a deeper capacity to relate and ultimately to reason. And meditation really helps me do this. And another bonus, I think, of my practice and our practice is that when we self-regulate, we can also help other people self-regulate. So I learned this just this past year from reading a text about trauma and sort of the neuroscience of trauma. And I had never known this before, even though I've raised 3 children. And that when we rock a baby, I used to always think that when I would rock my babies, I was soothing them by sort of stimulating their nervous system, that the rocking sort of went straight to them to help them self-soothe during distress, an experience of distress. What I've learned, and some of you may know this already, is that when we rock, even when we're rocking a baby, what happens is that we soothe ourselves. And because we are wired for connection, it is in our own self-soothing and self-regulation that we signal to the baby to regulate themselves. Kind of amazing. So, Pat, if you'll be kind enough to bring up the text today, and it's just a short text. 2 weeks from now, we are going to be sitting around our Seder tables, hopefully, telling the story of our liberation. And in the Torah, we read how our people journeyed from slavery to freedom on eagle's wings. And so it says in Exodus chapter 19, verse 4, "You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to me." And so, inspired by this part of the story, I want to begin our sitting now with a somatic practice that I call al kanfei nisharim, on eagle's wings. All right, it's a little experimental. I haven't done this with this group before, but I hope you'll go with me. All right, so Kat, you can actually take the text down. Thank you so much. So let's practice. Here's how this goes. I invite you to find your seat once again and just take a nice full breath in and a full breath out. And as we begin, I invite you to keep your eyes open so that you can watch me just at first. And I invite you, if you feel comfortable, eventually to close your eyes and continue on if it feels comfortable and supportive. But if you want to join me, I invite you to kind of hold up your hands. So palms facing yourself. And then you're going to cross your hands and gently hook your thumbs to kind of make wings. So point your fingers up and place your eagle's wings over your chest. And then just take a nice deep breath, and you're going to flap the wings of the eagle, pressing firmly under the collarbones, one at a time. So this is bilateral stimulation. And you can also do this by gently tapping one foot at a time, maybe not at the same time as you do the wings, but as an alternative. Or by placing two hands on your lap and just alternating a gentle tap or pressing of the hand onto your lap. And I invite you to just continue with this practice for a little bit with your eyes closed or with a soft gaze out in front of you. Allowing your breath to move with movement. And to continue with this practice, or when you feel ready to just find a comfortable resting position and just breathe. Tuning into your lungs breathing and your heart beating. Feeling yourself present and calm and self-regulated. And I'll bring us back together in a couple minutes with the sound of my voice. Ben Adam Alele Malale Alele Malale Ben Adam Alele Malale Ben Adam Alele Malale Alele Malale Ben Adam Alele Malale ייקח לך, יש לך כנפי רוח, יש לך כנפי רוח, כנפי נשרים אבירים, אל תיקח איש בה, הן יחשו לך. דרוש אותם, דרוש בן אדם, וימצאו מיים. As each one of us moves ever closer to Pesach and our own individual and collective paths of liberation, may we remember that we have the power to regulate ourselves so that we can wisely discern our next best step. May we remember that a time will come when we will declare the capacities is gone, and each one of us will do our best, whatever that looks like, to leave Egypt behind. May each one of us, and may we all as a collective be carried on eagle's wings, filled with a sense of God's grace as we journey into the days ahead. Thank you so much for your practice, for your presence. I'll turn it over to Josh.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, everybody. We'll have a chance in a moment to have some conversation about your experience with the practice, and I invite you to stay for that. Before that, we want to give a chance, the opportunity, anyone who is saying Kaddish today, who may be remembering someone, to please do so, to join us in saying Kaddish. And if you want to write the name of that person or those people in the chat, you are welcome to do so, and you're welcome to join me, unmute yourself and join in reciting Kaddish, the text of which we will put up on the screen just as soon as we do that. There we go. Thanks, Kat. So if you want to join me, you're welcome to unmute yourself. Yikadal, Alma, Dira, Agalam, Tarim,
Shmei Rabban Olam Shmei Rabba Yishtabach Arbi Adam V'Yeter Arbi Yisrael V'Chol Yishtabar Shmei Tamar Na'alam Dalal Meid Rabba Shemaya Yaakov Yisrael V'Yisrael
Tushbachata v'nechaman
Shalom
Yaseh Shalom Shana Rabbanim Shemael Tal Alinu Kol Yisrael Imru Amen. Shas.
Okay, so thank you again. Want to welcome Jenny back and say thank you for that really wonderful practice. And I want to invite anyone in the chat, if you want to share anything about your experience or any questions that you have about it, to please feel welcome to do that. That's the beauty of the chat here on Zoom. And Jenny, I was really struck, you talked, one of the things you invited us to do was this, well, you did the wings and the bilateral sort of stimulation. And I wonder if you wanted to say a little bit more about that, about the significance of sort of working with two sides, and that piece of the practice. What does that do for you? What do we know in general does that do? I just, curious to hear more about that.
Sure. So I'm thinking back to when I learned from Rabbi Jordan Ben Appel that, we're bipedal. Most of us have the ability to walk on 2 feet. And so in that motion, normally we're not thinking about it, but, different channels of the body are speaking to one another in a rhythmic way. And we're just sort of programmed for that kind of movement. Just as I was sitting here myself, I was thinking back to when I was going to bed as a child, my father would pat my back. And now I pat my 11-year-old's back. And there's just that rhythmic, a couple of people are talking about the rocking. That motion is, we're wired like in a primitive kind of way for that, both that rhythm, that physical sensation, that alternating motion to be soothing.
Mm-hmm. It makes me think about also in the Seder itself, right? There is that sort of rhythmical motion in a sense that the Talmud talks about that we have to tell the story derech she'ela u'tshuva, that it has to be a question and answer, right? And there's a lot of, this is a very conversational holiday in that, and I wonder if there's a certain, even to the point that if one is having a seder by themselves, you still have to ask yourself a question, right? You can't just say things. You have to there, and so there's sort of like a dialogue.
I love
that. Also mirroring what's going on there, maybe.
I love that. I love that back and forth, right? And so that back and forth is happening within ourselves and between us. And as you said, even if there's no one else physically in the room with us, there's a way in which there's an energetic exchange. I mean, I can also feel that on Zoom, even when we're gathering in this sense, right? Sometimes I end up sitting with this group after the fact with a recording, and it's beautiful and wonderful, and it feels different. So there's an energetic exchange that comes here, and that in and of itself, that energetic feedback is also part of being in connection.
Yeah. Did you want to say anything more about the Rav Kook poem also? Like you sang it at the end.
Yeah.
You had it on the sheet, but you didn't. But I wonder if you wanted to say anything more about that poem and that song, and just invite you to.
So I will just say that I learned it from Malila, who got a nice plug here as just an extraordinary teacher. I'll read out the words in English. Human being, rise up, for you have the strength to do so. You have wings of spirit, wings of powerful eagles. Do not deny them, or they will deny you. Seek them, and you will find them in a flash. It's, for me, these are words of spiritual chizuk, of encouragement. They're a reminder that I am both carried on eagle's wings and that I have my own wings, so to speak. And to kind of plug into that. So it's something I need to be reminded of.
Laura has a question here about, she says, this felt almost magically soothing. Could you offer suggestions as to how one might begin to create this soothing experience in solitude?
That's so nice. Thank you, Laura. Look, I will also say that sometimes sitting for meditation without motion is just really hard. And I sort of getting better at sensing when that feels like an unnecessary kind of constriction. And so instead, maybe it's sitting and rocking, or it's sitting and you can't quite see my hands, but and just tapping my knees or tapping my feet. And none of this, I didn't read this anywhere in a book. this is all just very intuitive. And I imagine for yourself also, trusting yourself to notice what kind of movement feels soothing, feels good in the body. I think we're actually programmed to have our own kind of internal instruction manual around this, although life has a way of getting us out of practice or not trusting ourselves to know what we need.
It's a lot of really great stuff in the chat here about Brian Wilson's song about rocking as a unrepentant shuckler myself. I can identify for sure. There was a question here about the book where you read about the rocker being soothed and transmitting to the baby.
Yeah, it's a great book. I really recommend it to everyone. It's called What Happened to You? And it's written by Dr. Perry, who's a child psychiatrist by training and really an expert in neuroscience. And then he co-authored it with Oprah Winfrey, of whom I'm a big fan.
Not hard to look up. You can Google Oprah.
No, totally.
A baby.
Yes. And it's a great book to listen to if you like to listen to books as well. I mean, Oprah's voice to me is very soothing. But it really does a great job of understanding how trauma moves through the brain and the body, and different way of looking at, instead of saying, usually people in our culture, when something happens, they say like, what happened to that person? Or, what happened to you? Or we don't say that enough, what happened? So it's a great book.
Andrew's also suggesting in response to Laura that you might try out different ways to visualize, right? The eagle's wings, or quote another Tanakh verse, etc. It also just occurs to me that, like, the word in Hebrew for those wings, right? Knafayim, right? Al kanfei nisharim, on the wing. So, and that word kanaf also is, of course, like the corners of the garment of the tzitzit, or the arba kanfot haaretz, the four corners of the earth. And when we bring together the tzitzit on the talit, it could be another opportunity to sort of experience, you're being wrapped in the eagle's wings, or wrapped in the wings of the Shekhinah also, right? We have the same language applies to both in both places. There's a lot of opportunities for that.
Yeah, I love that. I have long held that the talit is really a modern or a Jewish blankie, and that it is really the experience of being hugged and held that we're invited into.
I've also thought a lot about like and the difference between being in our own liturgy, not in that verse that you quoted, but in the liturgy we have al kanfei hashchina, on the wings of the divine presence, or tachat kanfei hashchina, under, right? And what's the difference when you're riding the wings, as it were, right? Which is the image of the verse. You're riding on eagle's wings, is like a Harry Potter sort of image, right?
Ocean.
Versus, being under the wings is more of this, protective presence, and just even playing with those two images is really, there's something here.
Yes.
Ooh, lots of stuff coming in here. This is great. Some different other questions that are coming in, and a lot of good conversation here about trauma books. And other things that folks are suggesting. There's a question from Gwyn here. The idea that we have the power to self-regulate is so powerful. I find that all it takes to move to a more regulated state is the mere gentle suggestion to shift my attention, connect to a more loving inner space, to move me out of that dysregulated space. My question is, since sometimes being in a dysregulated state takes you underneath language, because language itself can exacerbate the experience of dysregulation, what might be going on between mind body that allows those mere suggestions to reach us and move us to a better place? Wow, Gwyn, that's a great question.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I guess just something that kind of comes up inspired by that comment and question, Gwyn, is to keep keep it simple. So maybe it's just the image of the wings, or you have a different image. Maybe it's of a rocking chair, or of being tucked in to your bed at night. And so not to kind of get caught up in too much verbiage, and really just check in again. I find it so powerful that the places in which we can self-regulate are those most basic places, the beating heart, the breathing lungs, in the body, and we drop into those lower places in the brain, and those are things that all of us have access to on some level. So, and we don't need a lot of instructions to get there. Just a reminder that we can.
And it's so interesting here also about the role that language does or doesn't play. When you think of the image of the child, the baby, and the preverbal, and for many of us, it's actually quieting down from the language that's always going on in our minds to get to some place that's either above or below, but different than that. But sometimes language can be a help, and sometimes it can be a hindrance in the language of visualization that's been coming up, right? Images and music. Absolutely. Okay, lots of good things here. It's great.
Yes, Bessel van der Kolk. He's a fave. Big fan. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, and Linda, to the point that it's hard to take the time to pause, right? Well, that's why you're here, right? We have to make the time to do it. I also think there's been a lot of conversation here about humming, and you mentioned tapping too, right? Which is its own other practice that has lots you can do with that. Someone mentioned qigong and what tapping can do, right? All these ways that we can access these different pieces of our practice, and even in our own tradition. Again, I think of Pesach is this extremely embodied experience, not only in the food, but in the cleaning, in the searching, and the you mentioned your mother, she's having back surgery, and I was thinking, and your back is going to be feeling schlepping the dishes. I know this is why I have teenagers to do the schlepping.
Look, I will say one of my huge epiphanies from COVID, for a while, we had periodic help with cleaning the house, and during COVID, we eliminated that, and I have not gone back to any help. And I realized cleaning is a core component of my anxiety management. And I find it incredibly soothing. And so whether I'm cleaning the counter at night in the kitchen, that final gloss over, or I'm vacuuming, or I'm dusting, when I can get past, for example, Pesach, the kind of compulsive quality of your around what needs to be done, the actual experience is, as you said, is totally embodied. It has the potential to be actually quite soothing, depending on what I focus on, right? If I'm focusing on some sort of standard of perfection, of completion, no, that is raising the alarm bells. But if I can just drop into the movement and the experience of being in connection with my home in a way that is loving and tending and preparatory, it feels great.
If my colleague Rabbi Miriam Klotz here at IJS has an amazing practice that she's done for many years, where before starting to clean the kitchen, she and her wife sit in the kitchen, do a sit, and look around and just sort of take it in and be with it, for a few minutes. And I wrote about it in my book. It's right here. But in the essay on Shabbat Hagadol, I think the week before, the Shabbat before Pesach, I think in the practice section, I think is Miriam's practice, and so highly recommend. It's a wonderful moment as someone who also like, it's overwhelming and it's exhausting and all of that, but it's also like such an amazing gift and opportunity to be able to do. So
Amazing.
thank you so much for this set. This has really been wonderful. And thank you everybody for joining us today. Mark will be back tomorrow, and we will see you when we see you. Hope you can join us again tomorrow or sometime soon. So thank you. All right.